12 practical tips and tricks for rental contract negotiations in Israel. You're about to rent an apartment. A person purporting to represent the landlord presents you with a single sheet of paper and shows you where to sign on the dotted line. It's just standard wording, he assures you. What should you look out for to protect your interests? 1. Proper power of attorney and absentee landlord. First, insist on seeing an original power of attorney document to verify that the agent has actual authority to sign a rental contract with you on behalf of the landlord. This should be notarized, and if obtained outside of Israel, also apostilled. Check who will be your reference point if any repairs need to be effected during the term of your lease. Remember, you don't want to have to be dealing remotely via an absentee landlord who may be 7 to 10 hours distance away from you, especially in the case where urgent repairs may be required. A property manager or agent in Israel is therefore vital. 2. Property inspection before signing lease. Prevention is better than cure, especially if the apartment is old, and in particular if you plan on living in it for more than a few months. Consider undertaking a property inspection through a reputable engineer. Points to check include the presence or likely appearance of mold or dampness, retivut, on the walls, any leaky taps or toilets. Remember, you'll be responsible for paying the water bills, whether the fuse box is capable of bearing all of your appliances, etc. It is recommended to list and even photograph the apartment and the furnishings. For example, if a hinge on the door of a cabinet is not working, before entering the apartment, to avoid arguments and attempts to forfeit your security check at the end of the tenancy period over whether you've restored the apartment and any furnishings in it to the state it was in at the time you moved in. 3. Email as valid form of communication. Especially in the case of an absentee landlord, make sure the contract includes a clause stating that email is a valid means of communication between the parties, and including the parties' emails for this purpose. 4. Rent in advance. Try to avoid paying more than 1 month's rent in advance. Request a 7-day grace period which allows you to pay rent within 7 days of the contractual due date without breach of contract. 5. Option to renew. If you think you may be interested in continuing the tenancy for 1 further year or longer, you should request that an option to renew clause be inserted in the agreement. This will enable you to continue to rent the apartment on the same terms, including at the same rent, or at a rent to be increased by a certain percentage, provided you do not breach the terms of the rental agreement during the initial rental period. This arrangement will often be beneficial to the landlord too, because it saves him the heartache of having to find an alternative tenant, including possibly time during which the apartment may go unrented, and including the cost of advertising for a new tenant. In addition, if a mechanism for increasing the rent is already inserted into the original contract, the contract can be renewed automatically without the need for further lawyer's fees, etc. 6. Premature termination of one's lease. If the contract stipulates that the landlord has the right to give X number of days to terminate the lease prematurely, the tenant should insist on being given the same amount of time to break the lease should this prove necessary. If the lease is for a defined term, such as 1 year, try and get out of the need to find a suitable alternative tenant for the remainder of the term in the event that the lease requires premature termination. For example, after trying for a maximum period of 2 months, say. If you are required to find a replacement tenant suitable to the landlord, be sure to qualify this with words such as provided that the landlord shall not unreasonably refuse his consent to such alternative tenant. 7. Payment of expenses, arnona, water, va'ad bayit, etc. In terms of paying expenses, the tenant should only be responsible for usual expenses and regular va'ad bayit costs, building maintenance committee costs, not for building repairs or improvements or renovations, such as installing an intercom system or fixing a lift in the building or replacing a solar heater on the roof, etc. Arnona, the municipal tax on the apartment, can be high. Remember, it includes the water bill, so be careful to ask how much you'll have to pay in advance, albeit that as an Oleh Chadash, you're entitled to a discount of up to 90% on the bill for the first year on presentation of your lease to the Iriyah, the municipality. Arnona is payable according to the number of rooms and the amount of space in the apartment. Hence, it's important for the contract to make clear if one room is closed to you by the landlord. You should also inquire in advance as to how much you'll have to pay monthly to the va'ad bayit of the building. If there's no va'ad bayit, you will be responsible for performing your share of the upkeep of the common parts of the apartment building. 8. Maintenance of property. You should likewise be responsible only for repairs caused by your use of the property, not for fair wear and tear. The contract should be formulated in such a way as to make it clear that the renter is responsible only for repairs above and beyond what is normal usage, and that the owner is responsible for all other repairs, such as structural repairs, wiring or fuse box, and dampness or plumbing-related issues. 9. Insurance. You should insure your own belongings, while the landlord should insure the property and contents belonging to him. Of course, there are always those landlords who will try and roll over part or all of their building insurance premiums to the tenant, on the ground that the tenant's own contents insurance would not always cover third-party liability. For example, if a guest or child slips on the floor while the tenant is cleaning for Shabbat and then sues the tenant for his injuries. 10. Security deposit. It is normal to be required to give some form of security deposit, bitachon in Hebrew. If a personal check is given, you should write on the check the words Hamchaat bitachon bilvad lo sachir, clarifying that the check is for security deposit only and is non-negotiable. An undated blank check might be asked for by the landlord, in which case the lease should state by whom the check will be held and clear terms as to the conditions under which the check should be cashed and when it will be returned to you. Whether or not you are required to provide a promissory note, known as a shtar chov in Hebrew, and one or more guarantors, arevim, often depends on how good a negotiator you are. If a shtar chov has to be given, it should be limited in amount at a level of no more than 3 months' rent, especially when the rental term is not for many years and where the apartment and furnishings are not in mint condition. A demand to furnish a bank guarantee, known as an arivut bankait, should generally be resisted by the tenant, as it both costs money for its issue and locks up with the bank the amount on the guarantee. In addition, the landlord can cash it in without giving any notice to the tenant. Obviously, from a tenant's point of view, the less security he needs to give, the better and easier for him, especially as it may be near impossible for a new immigrant to provide a guarantor, let alone 2 guarantors. 11. Signing of the contract. Every handwritten change to the lease should be initialed by both parties. Likewise, the parties should initial at the bottom of every page of the contract with their full signature on the signature page. 12. Concluding remark. In general, remember, standard rental contracts in Israel tend to be very landlord-weighted, and you should not be afraid to negotiate the points in them. That said, it goes without saying that even negotiations need to be undertaken in a fair and balanced manner. Otherwise, you run the risk that the landlord will not want to take you as his tenant if he gets the impression that the entire tenancy will involve him in a negotiation match. For further advice on rental contracts or other areas of law, feel free to contact me by any of the following means. Thank you for listening, and have a great day.